Hi friends, welcome to the latest episode of the Nationalist View, and today we have with us a very special guest, Mr. Peter Baum. Peter, thank you so much for joining the show and taking time out from your busy schedule. And
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Mr. Peter Baum is a very well-known geopolitics expert. He writes extensively. He appears on a lot of television channels, and especially on the issue of Islamic radicalization. He is an authority, and he's also international affairs editor of the prestigious weekly in Bangladesh, Blitz. Mr. Baum, today we are going to talk about an article which recently appeared on the website of Gatestone Institute, written by editor-in-chief of Blitz, Mr. Salahuddin Shoaib Chaudhry. The article talks about, a shocking new report by the study of global anti-Semitism and policy, and in which it has talked largely basically about the Qatari influence, the influence of Qatar in terms of promoting Muslim Brotherhood, in terms of promoting radicalization. So I want to talk more about, in context of Qatar. So, sir, my first question is that how serious is actually Qatar's role in driving global Islamist ideology today?
I think Qatar is probably the most preeminent nation in driving this particular ideology. The ability of Qatar to do this is obviously driven by their vast wealth accumulated through their natural resources, their oil and gas. And they have used these funds, they have spared no effort in using these funds to promote an ideology which is to demonize not only Judeo-Christian values, but certainly to demonize the Jewish nation and to infiltrate and spread their message by means which have been very successful in academia, in culture, in sport, and in politics. And we can see how in the last 20 or so years, they have been overwhelmingly successful in achieving their goal. So the threat from this kind of ideology we have seen played out in the streets of Western capitals, on our university campuses, in threats as Islamists become emboldened as they grow their population in Western centres, and there seems no stopping of this. It was interesting that just a few days ago, the Trump administration determined that they were going to identify some sections of the Muslim Brotherhood and name them as terrorist organisations. What is a paradox is that the Muslim Brotherhood is banned in various Muslim countries such as Egypt, Jordan, the Emirates, Bahrain, etc., and also in Russia. I wonder when the Western countries will wake up and determine that this, what was a soft threat, is now a real threat to undermine their democracies. Very concerning, very worrying.
Sir, if we look at recently when this Israel-Hamas conflict was happening, we saw the so-called Gen Z doing a lot of protest, especially in the Western world also, but also the university campuses. So they kind of basically become the frontline peddlers of agenda of radical Islam. So if we talk in context of Qatar, the report which I mentioned, I'll also be sharing the link of this article in the description box. So it talks about, and you have also mentioned that university campuses are getting infiltrated by radical Islamists and with the backing of Qatar. So how do you see, especially in UK also, and you're joining us from there. So we have seen Cambridge, Oxford, School of Oriental and African Studies, other prestigious institutions also. So peddling the radical Islamist agenda. So what role? How big is this threat, and what is the role which Qatar is playing in this?
Well, the role that Qatar is playing is the pure funding of this. They are promoting this ideology by paying universities, first of all, to promote a certain curriculum. And when the universities, through lack of funds, accept the funding to promote that curriculum, that is when the Qataris use the people who are politically connected to them to teach those curriculums in the various universities. They fund them, they promote them, they give them access to similar people who are of the same ideology, and it's like a club that is spreading. So you have the universities that clearly need the funding. A government like Qatar comes over and says, we are happy to have to help a prestigious university like Oxford or Cambridge to we want to be a good guy and promote them, but for that we would like you to teach something like Oriental and Middle Eastern studies. And they say, sure, why not? It's a worthwhile part of the education system. Then once acceptance is made to have something like that within the educational curriculum, that's when they can use people in academia who are ideologically connected to their cause to help them, to fund organisations connected to them, and this is how they use that. It's the same in sport. We've seen that. We've seen how the Qataris use their wealth in things like horse racing, in football, etc., etc. We've seen it in culture, where the Qataris use their wealth to fund various playwrights who are of a certain political persuasion. So to go back to your first question is how big an influence are the Qataris are in promoting the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood. They are the main cog in the wheel. Without the Qataris, the success would never have been as expeditious and as globally structured as it currently is. And we've seen it in American universities, we've seen it all over the Western world. We're seeing it in places like Ireland, where the curriculum has been revised to a point where it no longer, where truth has morphed into fiction. And unless the political elite in Western societies determine that bridging the funding gap and identifying a political ideology that is an antithesis to Western values, until they determine that the two don't mix, I think we're going to see a further creep into our democracy through the arts, through culture, through sport, and most of all through education.
So, as you talked about, Qatar is trying to use the soft power also. But we have seen, it's a very paradoxical situation that the West is fighting Islamic radicalization. The whole world is fighting Islamic radicalization. But if we look at US, Trump visits, Qatar, and US has very cordial relationship with Qatar. And so, why the West is still kind of basically, Qatar is proving to be a fountainhead of terrorism, as you rightly said that it's the lifeline of it provides a lifeline to Muslim Brotherhood. So, but why the West is looking the other way?
I'm afraid it's two major reasons. One is the greed of the West. So money talks. And it was interesting when my ex business partner became the Lord Mayor of London, not the Mayor of London. The first thing that he did, with the blessing of the British government, was to host the Qatari royal family, lavish them. They met the king and queen, they praised them, all because of the need for the Qataris to invest more into the United Kingdom. Well, that comes at a price. And the price, as people like you and I recognise, is the probability that Islamic radicalisation and extremism will grow. I think Trump does recognise this, and it was interesting given how aligned he has been with Qatar, praising them at every opportunity, taking the Air Force One jet from them, having an American base in Qatar, etc., etc. It's interesting that there's a red line that cannot be crossed with him, and by coming out and stating that the Muslim Brotherhood or some branches of it will be considered to be a terrorist organisation, so far received no reaction or public reaction from the Qataris. So one can only assume that he has had discussions with them, told them what he's going to do, and said, look, if you're going to fight back on this could jeopardise US-Qatari relations. And we've seen that Trump doesn't play around. We've seen what he's doing in Venezuela and other South American countries. He's not holding back from those he perceives as enemies. So the Qataris, although they have an agenda, have maybe taken a step back and saying, okay, we understand. Unfortunately, the European nations are nowhere near where Trump is on this. And we will see continued access to all those institutions that the Qataris know will promote their ideology. There is one caveat against that. In a few months' time in the United Kingdom, we have what we call local elections. And it's clear that a party, an anti-Islamic extremist party, will do very well. If that's, as we suspect, the case, then that will certainly put pressure on the current government to do more to dilute the effects of Qatar. But that's kind of my wish, but an expectation. But whether they will have the courage to do that, because don't forget there is a huge Muslim vote in the United Kingdom. It probably accounts now for something like 5% of the electorate, and in what we would call the swing states, as we know that. So, and the youth are becoming ever more radicalised because of what they're being taught in universities, and for what they're seeing in a very left-wing media and in our trade unions, which are dominated by the left. And most people in the United Kingdom are very concerned about this, but don't have the courage to say what they mean. However, if this particular political party called the Reform Party does well, I think that will allow people to stand up, to put their heads above the parapet and say, look, this Islamic extremism has gone too far. We've got to do something about it. Whether other countries do that, such as France and Germany or Scandinavian countries, I'm not so sure. I did read today that Portugal has banned the burqa. I don't know, such as Denmark has done. So there does seem to be some kind of pushback, some kind of challenge, but how successful that challenge will be, only the months ahead will prove.
Sir, let's talk a little bit about proxies. So, Qatar has been using a lot of proxies. In fact, Muslim Brotherhood is also one of its proxy, but and Muslim Brotherhood has further more proxies. Whether it is the whether it is Hamas, Hezbollah. So there are a lot of basically proxies which they use. And one of the proxies I always kind of like to discuss is Al Jazeera. So, let's start with basically, Al Jazeera, and if you can throw a little bit light on basically how Al Jazeera is used to build media narratives, why Al Jazeera has been created by Qatar. So,
Indeed.
if you can, talk a little bit about this.
What most people don't realise is that Al Jazeera, through the Qatar Investment Corporation, which owns it, and the Qatar Investment Corporation is owned by the government of Qatar. So there's just a very short link between the three. And there is no doubt that Al Jazeera is just as RTTV is the main propaganda channel for Russia, just as Press TV is the main propaganda channel for Iran and the Khomeini regime, Al Jazeera is the propaganda channel for Qatar-backed Muslim Brotherhood. Of that there is no doubt. And anyone who studies the media, as people like you and I do, and watch Al Jazeera, would know just how successful they've been in the global media world in promoting their cause. Now, the West hasn't woken up to this, or if they have, they're not doing anything about it. If I were the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, I would ban Al Jazeera from our television screens. And if people want to watch it on YouTube or whatever, they would be able to do it. But I would ban it from mainstream broadcasting. Of that, there is no doubt, because they are the promoter of Islamic radicalization. They're very soft on, for example, it was very noticeable in the India-Pakistan conflict that happened a few months ago. The sympathy, the empathy, the support for not only the Pakistani government, but for the terrorist organizations operating within Pakistan and some in India and Afghanistan too, were given no, there was no views emanating from Al Jazeera that one could be considered critical of those institutions. However, on the other side, if you looked at how Al Jazeera were promoting India's role in all this, rather than being the victim of terrorist attacks, they promoted India as being the cause of the resistance for these. They didn't even call them terrorists, they called them militants. So in that just simple aspect, and this is how Al Jazeera has been configuring the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I'll give you another example of what they do in the disguise of being impartial. So when they have someone from the Israeli side talking about the conflict, that person would normally be someone who is very anti the Netanyahu government. Although he's coming from Israel, he would be anti the government at the time. Not only that, he would come from a very pro-Palestinian bias. So just because there is someone from Israel on it, and they can say, oh, we're being impartial, not at all. They have someone who is quite the reverse. But Al Jazeera have been very, very successful in promoting their brand, their ideology, and underneath it all, people like you and I know what this is, which is promoting the ideology of radical Islam. Of that there is no doubt. And the West has not woken up to that fact. Unfortunately, there is not one organization globally that can challenge the success of Al Jazeera. The BBC is very, very left-wing, as you know, and has been criticised very recently, so much so that the two of the senior people in the BBC have had to resign because of their bias. In the United States, because we have cable channels, there is only one, maybe Fox News, that has the ability to stand up. The rest these days are all done through right-wing or left-wing podcasts, as we know, which are becoming increasingly successful. But Al Jazeera has a reach unparalleled globally, and is using that reach to influence millions of people. And with the Qatari funding in our institutions, in other parts of the media, in our trade unions, in culture, they are currently winning this battle. Of that there is no doubt.
So my last question, going ahead now, we have kind of dissected the problem. So going ahead, what does democracies or at least democratic societies need to do to check this Islamist expansion, this promotion of Islamic extremism through Muslim Brotherhood and through other terrorist organizations by Qatar? So what can be done, given the fact now they have a media arm, they have a lot of wealth, and given also the fact that the political elite cutting across globe, so they are looking the other way because money matters to them, and also there is substantial Muslim population in a large number of countries, especially in like you mentioned in UK, they've reached almost 5%, and most of them are basically radical. I'm not saying all of them, but a significant part of them are radical Islamists. So what do we democratic societies need to do? How we can come together, or can we do something about it?
We can, but because we're democracies, we will find this particularly hard. So again, I can only look upon it as if I were the Prime Minister. What would I be doing? I would be certainly proving the links between Al Jazeera, the Muslim Brotherhood, and Qatar. One can easily connect those three institutions together. And because Trump has created the precedent now for a Western democracy to make the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organisation, we as democracies could leverage up on that. And the most important thing to do would be to dilute the influence of Al Jazeera. That first and foremost would be the most important thing. And we could do that. There's a very easy way to do that. The second most important thing we can do is to establish the links that the Qataris have in academia in our societies. That can be easily done as well. And I would certainly not allow any Qatari funding into our universities. That would be a no-go area. But first of all, we have to prove the links between Qatar, Al Jazeera and the Muslim Brotherhood. And once we've proved that, then we have the backing, the verification that Qatar influence has been a divisive influence, in many ways a demonic influence and an influence that is not compatible with the kind of Western democratic societies we wish to live in. So there are things that can be done if a government has the will to do it. I fear that currently only the Trump administration has the will to do it. And from what we've seen, they've made a start. I'm hoping they will go further. If he's successful, then depending on the makeup of the next government, presuming in the UK it's more of a right of centre government, they can follow the Trump lead. Now this will take some years, but even if we started today, it would still take a couple of years to implement. So there are things that can be done, providing the makeup of the government is, first of all, has an anti-Islamic extremism agenda to challenge the Islamic, and we're only talking about extremism here. We're not talking about the Muslim religion or mosques, or we're only talking about those who practice and preach the extremism and have been paid to do so. So there are things that can be done, but a lot will depend on the makeup of the Western governments going forward. I would hope that India, because of the unique role India has in the global picture, will also do its share, and I know it is doing its share, to challenge the Muslim extremists. It would be wonderful if the big Indian population, the United Kingdom, would support those who feel similarly threatened. At the moment, we have a few Hindu and Sikh MPs in our parliament, but as yet, not too many of them are putting their heads above the parapet, and believe me, I understand why. But maybe the Trump administration will give other Western democracies the necessary courage to say, you know, we can't continue with this, and we have to recognise that Al Jazeera and Qatar are the main funders, perpetrators, supporters, using, well, Al Jazeera being the proxy, if you like, of Qatar, and we have to start to challenge it, even though economically it may harm us.
Thank you, Mr. Peter Baum. Thank you for taking time out from your busy schedule. Always deeply insightful, conversation with you. The way you kind of demystifies complex issues. So thank you so much. We'll be back soon, hopefully, with Mr. Baum again. And thank you, viewers, for watching. And we'll be back soon with another conversation. Thank you.
God bless you.